We're now going to build on what we did in the last lesson, and we're going to start talking about consecutive number problems. And those can be consecutive integers, consecutive odd or even integers, etc. So let's get started. What does the word consecutive mean? If you had baseball practice on 3 consecutive nights, what would that mean? Consecutive means one after another. Consecutive integers are integers that come along one after another. So they could be 5, 6, 7. They could be 28, 29, 30. But don't forget about the negatives, and be careful when you have those negatives, because if I start with the consecutive number 11, the next consecutive number, be careful, it's -10 and then -9. Now when we think about the let statements for consecutive integer problems, if x is our first consecutive integer, how would I represent the next one? Well, every single time it's going to be x plus 1, because that's how I get to the next consecutive integer. Even if they're negative numbers, I'm adding 1. And then the third consecutive would be x plus 2. The fourth consecutive, x plus 3, etc., etc. Now, whenever you have consecutive number problems, you will have to set up as many let statements as the number of consecutive numbers you're trying to find. Let's try the first problem. Find 3 consecutive integers whose sum is 66. So that means I need 3 let statements. I let x equal the first, and I abbreviate this because consecutive is a long word, so I just write CI. And then x plus 1 is going to be my second consecutive integer, and then x plus 2 would be my third consecutive integer. And what's happening? Their sum is 66. So x plus 1 plus x plus 2, those are my 3 consecutive integers, is 66. So 3x plus 3 equals 66, 3x equals 63, and x equals 21. My consecutive integers are 21, 22, 23, and a quick mental check is going to tell me I solved it correctly. Why don't you try the next problem and come back and check with me? So there you have it, -32, -31, -30, and hopefully you didn't say -32, -33, -34, because oops, that would not check. Let's try the next one. They're going to start getting a little bit more complicated, but you have to pay attention to the words. Again, I have 3 consecutive integers, so I'm going to let x equal my first consecutive integer, etc. Now, 4 times the first is the same as 7 more than the sum of the second and the third. Well, the sum of the second and the third, I can just do that mentally. That's 2x plus 3, and it's 7 more than that. You can write it out if you'd like. It would look like 4x equals x plus 1 plus x plus 2, and then plus 7. Either way is acceptable. So then I'm going to get 2x equals 10 by simplifying, and x equals 5. So my numbers are 5, 6, and 7. And I just do a mental check again. 4 times the first is 20, and the sum of the second and the third is 13, plus 7 is 20. So it does check. Let's try number 4. Now this one has a little trick in it that becomes very difficult for students to remember. It's a detail and it matters. So write out your let statements. It says of 3 consecutive integers, twice the second added to the third is -29. Well, you have to remember that the second is this whole expression. It's not just x. So I have to use parentheses to keep my act together. So what is that going to look like? Twice the second, the entire second, added to the third is -29. Parentheses are your friend. They will help you keep it in order. And once I simplify that, I get 3x equals -33 and x equals -11. So again, this is -11, -10, and -9. Does that check? Twice the second, so -20 added to the third, -9. It does check that it's -29. Believe it or not, we're going to take it up even another notch. Consecutive odd and even. So if you think about consecutive odd, those are like 1, 3, 5, 7, or -11, -9, -7, -5. Okay? Consecutive evens, same kind of thing. 2, 4, 6, 8, -20, -18, -16, etc. Now I really want you to concentrate and think here. If I start with x as my first consecutive, let's do evens first. What's going to be the next consecutive even number? That's going to be x plus 2. And the third consecutive, x plus 4. And the fourth consecutive, x plus 6. And x plus 8. And on and on and on. Now if I do odd integers, the difference between one consecutive integer to the next is a difference of 2. What about odds? This is one of the most commonly misunderstood things that students do. They want to say, well, that's going to be x plus 1, x plus 3, x plus 5. Not really, because if I'm starting with the number 11, how do I get to the next consecutive odd number? I have to add 2. So guess what? The let statements, whether they are odd or even, are in the same format. You're always adding 2 to get to the next consecutive odd or even integer. Find 3 consecutive odd integers whose sum is 51. So I let x equal the first consecutive odd integer, then x plus 2 and x plus 4. Their sum is 51, so again, you could do this, x plus 2 plus x plus 4, representing each consecutive odd integer, and their sum is 51. Go ahead, pause here, and solve that. Hopefully you got 15, 17, and 19, and if you do a quick mental check, that does add up to 51. Find 2 consecutive even integers. Well, again, same format. Let x equal the first consecutive even integer, and then x plus 2 is the second consecutive even integer, such that twice the smaller, increased by the larger is 20. Go ahead and solve that on your own. Hopefully you got 6 and 8, and 2 times 6 plus 8 is in fact 20. Why don't you try 3 and 4 on your own? For number 3, -2, -20, -18, and that has a sum of -60. Hopefully on number 4 you're not too mad at me, but there was no solution to that, and you might get some that are no solution. What I'd like to make sure of, though, is that you're seeing you used parentheses to represent 3 times a quantity that might not be a single variable. Let's try number 5. The sum of the least and greatest of 3 consecutive integers. Now this one is not odd or even, so you need to be reading carefully. So my first consecutive integer is going to be x, and my second consecutive integer is going to be x plus 1, and my third consecutive integer is going to be x plus 2. Now the sum of the least and the greatest of 3 is 60. So 2x plus 2 equals 60, 2x equals 58, and x equals 29. So we have 29, 30, and 31. And if I add the least 29 and the 31, I do get 60. And again, this is going to go with this. Now we're going to mix it up a little bit and put some other kinds of things in there. And you can pause at any point here. If you want to stop and try these on your own and come back and check with me, please go ahead and do that. I'm going to continue and I'm going to work them out for people who are feeling a little bit not so confident. But I would encourage you to try to test yourself and see if you can work out the rest of these on your own. Then you can just come back and check the answers. Let's get started with number 6. The lengths of the sides of a triangle are consecutive odd numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and let x equal the first consecutive odd integer, x plus 2, remember, second consecutive odd integer, and x plus 4, third consecutive odd integer. And then what's the length of the longest side if the perimeter is 45? Well, the perimeter, remember, is the sum of all 3 of those. The sum of all 3, perimeter equals sum of all sides, and I can just plug in then 45 equals x plus 2 plus x plus 4, and that way I get 45 equals 3x plus 6, 3x equals 39, and x is going to be 13. So here I'm going to want to say 13, 15, and 17, and I'm going to put units because this is a perimeter problem. I don't know what they are, but they're some kind of unit, and that does add up to 45. Bob the Builder has a board that's 5 feet long. He plans to use it to make 4 shelves whose lengths are consecutive even numbers. How long should each shelf be in inches? I'm going to let x equal the first shelf and then my consecutive even numbers. To use the board that is 5 feet long, but I have to be careful because remember this is in inches. So 5 feet equals how many inches? Well, 12 inches in a foot, so that's going to be 60 inches. Now I'm going to add x plus 2 plus x plus 4 plus x plus 6 and get 60. 4x plus 12 equals 60, 4x equals 48, and x equals 12. I'm going to start with 12 inches, 14 inches, 16 inches, and 18 inches. And if I add all those up, I will get 60. Find 3 consecutive even integers such that twice the sum of the second and third is 34 more than 3 times the first. Boy, that's a mouthful. Well, let's just set up our let statements because once we have those, it kind of works itself out. So this is the first consecutive even integer, and you can go ahead and write the rest. I use these let statements and they really do help me set up my equation. Twice the sum of the second and the third. So I'm taking twice and I want to use parentheses because I have to sum the second and the third. Is 34 more than 3 times the first? And then I can go ahead and solve that, and you should pause here and do so. Hopefully you got 22, 24, and 26. So if I sum the second and the third, that's going to give me 50, and 50 times 2 is 100. If I take 34 more than 3 times the first, well, 3 times the first is 66. 66 plus 34 is 100, so it does check. Terrific job tonight. We will continue more with consecutive, consecutive odd, and consecutive even. Have a great night, everybody.